Hello space explorers, welcome to Sci-Fi Space, the place where we dive into the most mind-blowing sci-fi stories in the universe. But before we jump into today's epic story, take a second to check if you've subscribed. It's completely free, and it helps bring more sci-fi adventures straight to your feed. What would you do if you were the only human vet on an alien planet, staring down a bloodthirsty predator no one else dares to touch? Stick around, because this story's about to get wild. Today, we're diving into the deserts of Vylora, where Dr. Nolan Graves risks it all to save a Zarath, a beast everyone calls a monster. But here's the kicker: will he tame it, or will it turn on him? Trust me, you won't believe how this ends, so hit that play button and let's jump in. Dr. Nolan Graves had seen it all, or so he thought. As the only human veterinarian on the desert planet Vylora, he'd spent years stitching up creatures that would give most people nightmares. Venomous lizards that melted skin with a single bite, winged serpents that regrew severed tails overnight, and giant spiders that sang prey to sleep. He'd handled them with steady hands and a calm voice. But when his COMM device buzzed with an urgent distress call one sweltering afternoon, Nolan knew this wasn't just another routine job. The voice on the other end belonged to a local clinic admin, a jittery bug-like alien whose words came out in a panicked hiss. "Dr. Graves, we need you now. There's a creature here, nobody will touch it. Hurry." The line went dead before Nolan could ask a single question. He sighed, checked his medkit, stocked with numbing agents, bandages, and a stash of dried meat for emergencies, and headed out into the blistering heat. The veterinary clinic sat on the edge of Vylora's main settlement, a squat building pieced together from sandstone and scrap metal. When Nolan arrived, he found a cluster of alien vets standing well back from a reinforced isolation pen, their bio-suits glinting under the harsh lights. Inside the pen, a massive beast crouched in the corner, its red fur matted and dull, its violet eyes glowing as they flicked toward the onlookers. A low growl rumbled from its chest, deep enough to make the floor hum. "Dr. Graves," a cold voice cut through the tension. Nolan turned to face Lunvar, the clinic's chief veterinarian. Lunvar was a towering multi-limbed alien, his slick, oil-black skin shimmering as his six thin arms twitched in agitation. "You're here because we refuse to treat that thing." He jabbed a claw toward the creature, his tone dripping with disdain. Nolan crossed his arms, sizing up both Lunvar and the beast. "And why's that?" Lunvar's small eyes narrowed, flashing with irritation. "It's a Zarath, a desert destroyer. Top predator on this dustball planet. No natural enemies, built to kill. It's injured, and we're not stupid enough to get close." Nolan stepped toward the pen, peering through the electrified netting. The Zarath shivered, a trickle of black fluid seeping from a gash on its chest. Its breathing was ragged, uneven. "Doesn't look like much of a killer right now," Nolan said, keeping his voice level. Lunvar let out a sharp, grating noise, something between a laugh and a snarl. "Not a killer? It could rip you apart before you blink. We called you because you humans think you're invincible." Nolan shrugged, unfazed. "Or maybe we just see what you're missing." Lunvar waved a clawed hand, signaling his team feathered and scaly assistants to back off further. "You don't get it," he said, lowering his voice to a hiss. "A Zarath doesn't show weakness. If it's trembling like that, it's desperate. And a desperate predator's more dangerous than a healthy one." Nolan crouched, studying the creature closer. The gash on its chest was deep, oozing pus and crusted blood. "How long's it been hurt?" he asked. "3 cycles, Lunvar muttered, reluctance heavy in his tone. "Nobody's risked treating it. Even in pain, it could kill us all." Nolan stood, locking eyes with Lunvar. "So you're just gonna let it die in there? Because you're scared?" Lunvar bared his needle-like teeth, his spines bristling. "Yes, human. We're not fools like you. If you want to die, go ahead and step inside. Don't expect us to pull your corpse out." Nolan smirked, a dry edge to it. "I don't need you to save me. Just open the pen." The assistants erupted in alarmed chatter. A small, feathered one squawked, "He's insane. It'll shred him." Another, a scaly runt, clutched its tools tighter, shaking its head. Lunvar folded his arms, his gaze icy. "You heard them, Dr. Graves. But if you're so determined to prove humans are better than us, be my guest." "Open it," he snapped at an assistant. Nolan took a deep breath, steadying himself. He wasn't scared, not exactly. He'd faced enough beasts to know that sometimes what looked like aggression was just pain wearing a mask. As the electrified netting hummed and slid open, the sound sharp and final, his pulse kicked up a notch. This was it. The Zarath lifted its head, those violet eyes locking onto him. Another growl rolled out, low and guttural, but it didn't move. Nolan stepped inside, slow and deliberate, hands open at his sides. "Hey, big guy," he said softly. "Looks like you've had a hell of a day, huh?" The Zarath tilted its head, nostrils flaring as it sniffed the air. Lunvar's voice cut in from behind, thick with mockery. "It doesn't understand you, human. It only knows how to kill." Nolan ignored him, kneeling a few feet from the beast. "You're hurting bad, aren't you? Stuck in here, everyone staring like you're some monster." "I get it." He nodded toward the wound. "The way you're sitting, you're keeping weight off that chest. If you were gonna attack, you'd have done it by now." Lunvar hissed, venom in his tone. "You're mad. It doesn't feel fear, it doesn't know how." Nolan shrugged again. "Maybe not fear like you think. But it's hurt, cornered, and trapped. Anything would freak out like that." Lunvar gestured sharply to close the pen, but Nolan raised a hand. "Don't. I'll prove it." The room went still, the hum of the netting fading. Nolan met the Zarath's gaze, his voice steady. Whatever happened next, he was ready. The silence in the clinic hung heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the deactivated netting and the Zarath's uneven breathing. Nolan stayed crouched, eyes locked on the beast, while Lunvar's glare burned into his back. The chief vet's voice sliced through the tension, sharp and biting. "You're wasting your breath, human. That thing doesn't care what you say. It's a killing machine, and you're about to be its next meal." Nolan didn't budge, his tone steady. "If it's such a killer, why is it just sitting there? Look at it shaking, bleeding. That's not a machine. That's an animal in pain." Lunvar let out a harsh, clicking laugh, his 6 arms flexing in frustration. "Pain? You think a Zarath feels pain like some weak little pet? It's built to slaughter, not to whimper. We've seen what it can do, torn caravans, shredded hunters, whole camps wiped out in minutes. You're blind if you think it's anything but a monster." Nolan glanced over his shoulder, meeting Lunvar's glare. "I've seen plenty of monsters. This one's not lunging at me. Maybe you're the one who's blind, too scared to see what's really going on." The room stirred. The feathered assistant from earlier piped up, voiced shrill with panic. "He's right, Lunvar. It's too dangerous. We should have left it to rot days ago." Another, a wiry lizard, like Tech, nodded furiously. "Yeah, why risk it? Let the human play hero if he wants, he's not one of us." Lunvar raised a claw, silencing them. His eyes narrowed at Nolan. "You hear that? They're smarter than you. We've survived Vylora by knowing what to avoid. You humans stumble in, thinking you can fix everything with your soft hearts and dumb luck." Nolan stood, brushing sand off his knees. "Soft hearts? Nah. I just don't write off something because it's got claws and a bad rep. How long you said it's been hurt? 3 cycles. That's 3 days it's been stuck in there, and none of you even tried." Lunvar's spines flared, his voice dropping to a growl. "Tried? We're not suicidal. That wound's deep, probably from a spear or a trap. It's been festering, and it's still alive. You know what that means? It's tougher than anything you've ever faced. One wrong move, and it'll gut you faster than you can scream. Nolan stepped closer to the Zarath, ignoring the gasps from the assistants. The beast's violet eyes followed him, sharp and unblinking, but it didn't tense or snarl. Tough, sure, Nolan said. But it's not invincible. Look at that gash, pus, blood, infection setting in. It's not fighting because it can't. Not right now. Lunvar snorted, a wet, derisive sound. Can't? You're delusional. It's waiting, playing weak to lure you in. Zarath don't submit. They don't beg. If it's not attacking, it's because it's planning something worse. Nolan shook his head, crouching again near the beast. Planning? You're giving it too much credit. It's hurt, cornered, and surrounded by people who want it dead. That'd mess with anything's head. You ever think it's not about weakness, it's about survival? Lunvar stomped forward, his claws clicking on the stone floor. Survival? It's survive by killing everything in its path. You're projecting your human nonsense onto a predator that doesn't care. It doesn't feel fear, or pain, or anything you can understand. Nolan pointed at the Zarath's chest, where the black fluid dripped steadily. That's not nonsense. That's biology. It's favoring that side, keeping weight off it. If it wanted me dead, I'd be bleeding out already. You're just too busy being terrified to notice. The assistants shifted uneasily, murmuring among themselves. The feathered one squawked again. He's crazy. Lunvar, don't let him do this. The lizard tech chimed in, yeah, he'll get us all killed. Humans don't belong here. Lunvar raised all 6 arms, his voice booming. Enough. You want to die proving a point, Graves. Fine. But don't drag us into your madness. He turned to the tech. Get the controls. If he insists, let him face it alone. Nolan didn't flinch. Alone's fine by me. Just don't lock me in when I'm right. Lunvar's eyes glinted with something dark, anger, maybe, or grudging curiosity. Right? You think you'll walk out of there? You're a fool. A Zarath doesn't need a reason to kill, it just does. And when it's desperate, it's unstoppable. Nolan pulled the dried meat from his kit, holding it up. Unstoppable's a strong word. Let's see if it's true. He tossed the meat onto the floor between him and the Zarath, stepping back slightly. Go on, big guy. Show me what you've got. The beast's nostrils flared, its head tilting as it sniffed. The room went dead quiet. Then, in one fluid motion, it swiped the meat with a claw and swallowed it whole. No lunge, no snap, just a quick, deliberate grab. The assistants yelped, stumbling back, but Nolan grinned. See? Not unstoppable. Hungry. Lunvar's jaw tightened, his claws flexing. You fed it. You actually fed it. Are you trying to tame it or just speed up your death? Neither, Nolan said, pulling out a numbing spray. I'm trying to help it. Step 1's trust. Step 2's fixing that mess on its chest. He nodded at the wound. Unless you'd rather let it die and prove you're all too chicken to do your jobs. Lunvar lunged forward, stopping just short of the pen's edge. Chicken? You dare insult us? We've kept this clinic running while your kind bumbles around playing savior. You don't belong here, Graves. You don't understand Vylora. Nolan met his stare, unflinching. Maybe not. But I understand that thing in there better than you do. And I'm not leaving it to rot because you're all too proud to admit you're wrong. Lunvar's spines quivered, his voice a low hiss. Proud? This isn't pride, it's survival. You're gambling with our lives. Then call it a bet, Nolan shot back. I'll go in, fix it, and walk out. You watch. Or keep standing there whining, your choice. Lunvar glared, then stepped back, gesturing sharply. Fine. Go die. But when it tears you apart, Don't cry for help. He waved at the tech. Leave the pen open. Let the human prove his theory, or his stupidity. Nolan exhaled, turning back to the Zarath. Its violet eyes held his, steady and piercing. All right, big guy, he murmured. Let's show 'em. He took a step closer, spray in hand, ready for whatever came next. The clinic's air thickened as the netting stayed open, a gaping invitation to chaos. Nolan stood just inside the pen, the Zarath a few feet away, its violet eyes locked on him like twin lasers. The beast's red fur bristled, its massive frame trembling slightly, not from aggression, Nolan figured, but from the effort of holding itself together. Behind him, Lunvar and the assistants watched, their silence a mix of dread and disbelief. Nolan could feel their stares, but he kept his focus on the creature. Okay, big guy, he said, keeping his voice low and even. You're not gonna eat me, right? We're cool after that snack. He held up the numbing spray, showing his empty hands otherwise. Just wanna help you out here? The Zarath growled, a deep rumble that vibrated through the stone floor, but it didn't move. Its nostrils flared, catching his scent again. Nolan took that as a good sign, or at least not a death sentence. He edged closer, slow and deliberate, watching its every twitch. The wound on its chest was worse up close, a jagged tear, crusted with dried blood and oozing yellow pus. Whatever had hit it, a spear, maybe a trap, had dug deep. Lunvar's voice cut in, sharp and mocking. You're a dead man, Graves. It's playing with you, waiting for the perfect shot. Nolan didn't look back. If it wanted a shot, I'd be in pieces already. Shut up and let me work. He knelt, keeping a safe distance but close enough to reach the wound if he had to. The Zarath's ears flicked toward him, its claws flexing against the floor, leaving shallow scratches in the stone. The feathered assistant squeaked from behind. Lunvar, stop him. He's gonna get us all killed. The lizard tech hissed in agreement. Yeah, it'll break out once he pisses it off. Lunvar snarled, his claws clicking impatiently. Let him try. When it rips his head off, we'll seal the pen and call it a lesson. Nolan ignored them, spraying a light mist of numbing agent toward the wound. The Zarath flinched, a low growl rolling out, but it didn't snap. The spray hit the gash, and the beast's trembling eased slightly, its breathing steadying. There you go, Nolan murmured. Feels better already, huh? He pulled a wad of gauze from his kit, inching closer. The Zarath tensed, its tail thumping hard against the floor, once, twice, like a warning drum. Nolan froze, hands up. Easy, easy. I'm not here to hurt you. He waited, letting it settle, until its tail stilled. Then he leaned in, dabbing at the wound to clear the pus and blood. The assistants gasped audibly, a collective intake of breath. Lunvar barked, You're insane. It'll claw you open any second. Nolan kept going, his hands steady despite the adrenaline pumping through him. It hasn't yet. Maybe you're wrong about it. The gash was deep but not fatal, nothing broken, just a nasty infection starting to spread. He muttered to the Zarath, You're lucky, big guy. Dragging this around too long, though. Bet it sucks. The beast huffed, a sharp exhale that almost sounded annoyed, not at him, Nolan thought, but at its own state. He grinned faintly. Yeah, I get it. Being laid up's the worst. He worked fast, wiping away the mess and prepping an antibiotic patch. The Zarath stayed still, its violet eyes tracking his every move, wary but not hostile. Lunvar stomped closer to the pen's edge, his voice rising. This is madness. You're not a vet, you're a lunatic. It's tolerating you now, but the second it's done playing nice, you're toast. Nolan slapped the patch over the wound, securing it with quick, practiced motions. Toast, huh? Guess I'm still cooking, then. He sat back, meeting the Zarath's gaze. Those eyes weren't wild or raging anymore, they were curious, maybe even relieved. See? Not so bad, right? The beast shifted, stretching its massive paws out in front of it, like a cat settling down. Its growl softened into something quieter, less threatening. Nolan nodded. Good boy. We're getting somewhere. Lunvar threw up his arms, his spines rattling. Good boy? You're talking to it like it's a damn dog. It's a Zarath, you idiot, a desert destroyer. You've lost your mind. Nolan stood, brushing his hands off. Maybe. Or maybe you've lost yours, freaking out over something that's just scared and hurt. He turned to face Lunvar, keeping the Zarath in his peripheral vision. You said it doesn't feel fear. Look at it now, calm, not clawing my face off. What's that tell you? Lunvar's eyes blazed, his claws flexing. It tells me you're lucky, not smart. That thing's biding its time. You humans think you can charm anything, well, charm's gonna run out when it decides you're lunch. The feathered assistant chimed in, voice quivering. He's right, Lunvar. It's too quiet, it's planning something. The lizard tech nodded. Yeah, we should lock it back up before it snaps. Nolan waved a hand dismissively. Lock it up if you want, but I'm not done. He pulled a small scanner from his kit, aiming it at the wound to check the infection's spread. The Zarath twitched but didn't react beyond a flick of its tail. The scanner beeped, stable, not critical. You're tougher than you look, Nolan said to it, pocketing the device. Gonna be fine. Lunvar lunged forward, stopping just shy of stepping into the pen. Fine? You think this is fine? You've got no idea what you're dealing with. It's not some stray you can patch up and send home, it's a predator, a killer. Nolan turned fully now, facing Lunvar head-on. And you've got no idea what I'm capable of. I've fixed worse than this with less. You wanna stand there yelling, or you wanna let me finish? Lunvar's spines quivered, his voice a low hiss. Finish? You're digging your own grave. When it turns on you, don't expect us to clean up the mess. Nolan smirked, glancing back at the Zarath. I'll take my chances. The beast let out a soft huff, almost like agreement, and Nolan felt a flicker of something, trust, maybe, starting to build. He knelt again, checking the patch. Hang in there, big guy. We're not done yet. But then the trouble started. The Zarath shifted, stretching out fully and sprawling across the pen's floor, its head resting near Nolan's feet. It didn't move when he stood, just watched him with those steady violet eyes. Lunvar's voice dropped to a horrified whisper. It's not leaving. It's staying. Nolan frowned, hands on his hips. It's recovering. What's the big deal? Lunvar pointed a trembling claw. The big deal? Zarath don't stay. They retreat to the desert to heal, alone. It's staying because of you. Nolan blinked, looking down at the beast. It cracked one eye open, staring back. He muttered. Guess that's new. Lunvar groaned, clutching his head. New? It's a disaster. If it's bonded to you, it won't leave your side. You've just made yourself its keeper, or its prey. Nolan scratched his neck, half smiling. Keeper sounds better. Let's go with that. The Zarath huffed again, and for the first time, Nolan wondered just how deep he'd gotten himself in. Nolan barely had time to process Lunvar's warning before the clinic's walls shook. A muffled boom echoed from outside, followed by a gritty cloud of red sand billowing through the open door. The Zarath lifted its head, ears twitching, a low growl rumbling in its throat. Nolan spun toward the sound, his gut tightening. What the hell was that? Lunvar froze, his 6 arms stiffening. Trouble, he muttered, peering out the entrance. Before he could say more, heavy footsteps crunched on the sand, and a group of figures stormed in 5 of them, decked out in patched armor and wielding plasma rifles and electrified spears. These weren't clinic staff or settlers. They were hunters, and they looked pissed. The leader, a broad-shouldered brute with a scarred face and a jagged metal eye patch, stepped forward. "Where's the Zarath?" he barked, voice rough as gravel. His name was Vexon. Nolan caught it from the patch stitched onto his chest. "We know it's here. Hand it over." Nolan planted himself in front of the pen, arms crossed. "Who's asking? And why should I care?" Vexon smirked, twirling a spear in his hand. "We're the ones who put that hole in its chest 3 days ago. Tracked it across the desert, set a trap, damn near had it. It's ours, our trophy. You're just in the way, Doc." Nolan's jaw tightened. "Yours? Looks like it's doing fine without you. Maybe you should have finished the job." Vexon's smirk vanished. He stepped closer, looming over Nolan. "Funny guy, huh? We did this for a payday. Zarath pelts fetch a fortune off-world. Now move, or I'll carve you up and take it anyway." The assistants scattered, ducking behind equipment. The feathered one squeaked, "Lunvar, do something." But Lunvar didn't budge. His eyes darted between Vexon and Nolan, calculating. Then, to Nolan's shock, he spoke up. "He's right, Graves. Give them the beast. We don't need this fight." Nolan whipped around, staring at Lunvar. "You serious? You're siding with these clowns?" Lunvar's spines flattened, his voice low and shaky. "I'm keeping us alive. They've got guns, spears, more than we can handle. Hand it over, and they'll leave. It's not worth dying for." Vexon laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Smart bug. Listen to him, Doc. 10 seconds, or we start shooting." Nolan clenched his fists, glancing at the Zarath. The beast was on its feet now, fur bristling, violet eyes narrowed at the hunters. "You're not taking it," he said, voice hard. "Not after I just patched it up." Vexon's eye glinted. "Your funeral." He raised his rifle, but before he could fire, the Zarath roared, a bone-rattling sound that made the hunters flinch. In a blur of red fur, it lunged at the pen's edge, claws slashing through the air. Vexon jumped back, cursing, as the others scrambled to aim. "Hold it!" Nolan shouted, stepping between the beast and the hunters. "Nobody's shooting anybody yet." Vexon sneered, leveling his gun again. "Big mistake, Doc." He fired. A plasma bolt screamed past Nolan's shoulder, sizzling into the wall. The Zarath snarled, slamming its bulk against the pen's frame. The metal groaned but held for now. Lunvar darted forward, grabbing Nolan's arm with 2 of his claws. "Stop this! Give it to them, or we're all dead." His voice cracked, panic seeping through. "You don't get it, they'll burn this place down." Nolan yanked free, shoving Lunvar back. "And you don't get it, I'm not handing over something I just saved because you're scared shitless." He turned to Vexon. "You want it? Come get it." Vexon grinned, all teeth. "Oh, I will." He barked an order, "Take him down," and the hunters surged forward. One swung a spear at Nolan, who ducked and grabbed a fallen med tray, smashing it into the guy's face. The hunter staggered, blood trickling from his nose, but another fired a shot that grazed Nolan's leg, searing hot. The Zarath roared again, louder, and this time the pen buckled. With a wrenching screech, it tore free, leaping into the fray. Its claws raked across the hunter's chest, sending him sprawling in a spray of blood. Vexon yelled, "Kill it, now," but the beast was too fast. It spun, knocking another hunter into a stack of crates with a sickening crunch. Nolan dove for cover behind a table as plasma bolts lit up the room. "Lunvar, get out," he shouted, but Lunvar was already bolting for the door, yelling, "I'm not dying for you." The assistants followed, abandoning ship as the clinic turned into a war zone. Vexon regrouped, aiming at the Zarath. "You're mine, you bastard." He fired, the bolt hitting its flank. The beast stumbled, growling in pain, but didn't go down. Nolan cursed, grabbing a scalpel from the floor. Not much, but better than nothing. He lunged at Vexon, slicing at his arm. The hunter howled, dropping his rifle, and swung a fist that caught Nolan in the jaw, sending him reeling. The Zarath recovered, charging Vexon and pinning him to the ground with a massive paw. Its claws hovered over his throat, trembling with barely held restraint. Vexon froze, eye wide. "Call it off, Doc. Call it off." Nolan staggered to his feet, wiping blood from his lip. "Think it likes me more than you?" He limped toward the beast. "Easy, big guy. He's done." But the fight wasn't over. The surviving hunters regrouped outside, their shouts echoing through the busted door. Nolan glanced at the Zarath, its breathing heavy, blood dripping from its flank. "We can't stay here," he said, grabbing his kit. "Come on." The beast huffed, stepping off Vexon, who scrambled back, clutching his arm. Nolan didn't wait, he bolted for the rear exit, the Zarath limping after him. Lunvar's betrayal stung, but there was no time to dwell. Outside, the desert stretched endless and red, a storm brewing on the horizon. The hunters' engines revved in the distance, they weren't giving up. Nolan looked at the Zarath, its violet eyes fierce despite the pain. "You're with me now, huh?" The beast growled softly, almost a yes. Nolan nodded. "Good. Let's move." They ran, sand kicking up behind them, as the hunters' shouts faded into the wind. Vylora wasn't safe anymore, not for either of them. Nolan's boots sank into the red sand as he and the Zarath bolted from the clinic, the desert sprawling ahead like an endless furnace. His leg burned where the plasma bolt had grazed him, and his jaw throbbed from Vexon's punch, but he pushed through. Behind them, the hunters' engines roared to life, gritty, patched-up desert rigs kicking up clouds of dust as they gave chase. The Zarath limped beside him, its flank bleeding from the fresh hit, but its violet eyes blazed with a fire that said it wasn't done yet. "We've gotta lose him," Nolan muttered, scanning the terrain. A cluster of jagged rock formations loomed ahead. Cover, maybe. He veered toward it, the Zarath keeping pace despite its wounds. The engines grew louder, closing in fast. A crack split the air, a spear, electrified and humming, slammed into the sand inches from Nolan's feet. He cursed, diving behind a boulder as another shot whizzed past. The Zarath crouched beside him, growling low, its claws digging into the ground. Nolan peeked out. 3 rigs skidded to a stop, spitting out Vexon and his remaining hunters, 2 left, both armed to the teeth. Vexon's arm bled where Nolan had cut him, but he gripped a plasma rifle like it was an extension of his rage. "End of the line, Doc," he shouted, voice raw. "That beast's mine, and you're just collateral." Nolan gripped the scalpel, its tiny blade laughable against rifles and spears. "Yeah? Come take it, asshole." He glanced at the Zarath. "You ready, big guy?" The beast huffed, muscles tensing, and Nolan swore it understood him. Vexon laughed, leveling his gun. "You're dead, and that thing's a rug." He fired, the bolt searing toward them. Nolan ducked, but the Zarath moved fast, impossibly fast for something so beat up. It leaped over the boulder, a red blur, and crashed into the nearest hunter. Claws flashed, the guy screamed once before hitting the sand, out cold or worse. The second hunter swung a spear, its tip crackling with blue energy. "Get off him," he yelled, thrusting at the Zarath. The beast dodged, barely, the spear grazing its shoulder. It roared, swiping back, and sent the hunter sprawling into his own rig, metal crumpling under the impact. Vexon didn't flinch. He dropped the rifle, pulling a machete from his belt, its edge glinting wickedly. "Fine, hand-to-hand it is." He charged Nolan, who rolled out from cover, scalpel up. The blade met Vexon's swing, metal clanging, but the machete's weight knocked it from Nolan's hand. Vexon grinned, slashing again. Nolan dodged, sand spraying, and tackled Vexon's legs, bringing him down hard. They grappled, fists flying. Vexon's elbow smashed into Nolan's ribs, knocking the wind out of him, but Nolan drove a knee into the hunter's gut, earning a grunt. "You're done." Vexon snarled, pinning Nolan and raising the machete. Before it could drop, a shadow loomed. The Zarath, bloodied but unbowed, slammed into Vexon, hurling him off like a rag doll. He hit a rock with a crack, groaning but still moving. Nolan scrambled up, gasping. "Nice timing, big guy." The Zarath huffed, standing over him, its gaze locked on Vexon. The hunter staggered to his feet, clutching his side, machete still in hand. "You think you've won?" he spat, blood trickling from his mouth. "I'll gut you both." He lunged, but the Zarath was ready. It sidestepped, jaws snapping, and caught Vexon's arm in its teeth. The machete fell as he screamed, thrashing. Nolan shouted, "Don't kill him." The beast paused, its grip loosening just enough for Vexon to wrench free, clutching his mangled arm. He stumbled back, eyes wild. "You're crazy, both of you." The remaining hunter, back on his feet, grabbed a spear and charged the Zarath from behind. "Die, you freak," he yelled, driving the electrified tip toward its spine. Nolan dove, tackling the guy mid-thrust. They hit the sand, the spear sparking harmlessly beside them. Nolan punched him square in the jaw once, twice until he went limp. Breathing hard, Nolan rolled off, grabbing the spear. Vexon was up again, limping toward his rig, one hand fumbling for a backup pistol. "I'm not done," he rasped, aiming shakily. The Zarath growled, ready to pounce, but Nolan stepped forward, spear raised. "Drop it, Vexon. You're out of moves." Vexon's eye narrowed, finger twitching on the trigger. Then the Zarath roared, a sound so primal it shook the air, and Vexon faltered, the pistol slipping from his hand. He cursed, backing toward the rig. "This ain't over, Doc. I'll be back for that thing." He climbed in, engine sputtering, and peeled off, leaving his fallen crew behind. Nolan lowered the spear, chest heaving. The desert went quiet, just the wind whistling through the rocks. He turned to the Zarath, its fur matted with blood, some its own, some not. "You okay, big guy?" The beast limped over, nudging his arm with its massive head, a soft rumble in its throat. Nolan scratched its ear, grinning despite the ache in his ribs. "Guess we make a hell of a team." But the victory felt shaky. The Zarath was hurt worse now, its flank oozed from the plasma hit, and the spear graze on its shoulder looked raw. Nolan knelt, checking it quick. "You're a tank, but even tanks need a break." He glanced at the abandoned hunters, one out cold, the other groaning feebly. They weren't a threat anymore, but Vexon's words lingered. He'd be back. Nolan stood, scanning the horizon. The storm was closer now, dark clouds churning red with sand. "We can't go back to the clinic, not with Lunvar selling us out and Vexon on our tail." The Zarath huffed, its violet eyes steady on him. Nolan nodded. "Yeah, you're right. We're in this together now." He grabbed his kit from the sand, slinging it over his shoulder. "Let's find somewhere safe, figure this out." The Zarath followed, its steps uneven but determined, as they headed deeper into the desert. The fight was won, but Nolan knew it was just the start. Vexon wasn't the type to quit, and the Zarath's loyalty came with a cost he couldn't yet see. For now, though, they'd survived, and that was enough. The desert swallowed Nolan and the Zarath as they trekked deeper into its red expanse, the storm's edge nipping at their heels with gusts of stinging sand. Nolan's leg ached, his ribs screamed with every breath, and the Zarath limped worse now, its flanks slick with blood. But they kept moving, away from the clinic, away from Vexon's threats, away from Lunvar's betrayal. The rocks gave way to dunes, and Nolan's gut told him they needed shelter fast. He didn't know where they were headed, but the Zarath seemed to. Its violet eyes stayed sharp, guiding them with purpose. After what felt like hours, the beast stopped at a low ridge, pawing at the sand. Nolan frowned, wiping sweat from his brow. "What's up, big guy?" The Zarath growled softly, digging harder, and soon a dark crevice yawned open, a cave, hidden beneath a dune. It nudged him with its head, insistent. All right, Nolan said, ducking inside. The beast followed, its bulk barely squeezing through. The cave was cool, a relief from the heat, and dim light filtered through cracks above. Nolan's jaw dropped as he saw what lay inside, a nest, dozens of fist-sized eggs, their shells shimmering like polished stone, tucked against the back wall. He turned to the Zarath, stunned. You're a mom? Shit, that's why you fought so hard. The beast settled beside the eggs, its massive head resting protectively over them, and let out a low rumble, confirmation, maybe pride. Nolan sank to his knees, piecing it together. You weren't just running from Vexon. You were keeping these safe. He reached out, hesitant, and the Zarath didn't flinch as he brushed its fur. Guess I'm part of the family now, huh? It huffed, almost amused, and Nolan felt a strange warmth, until footsteps crunched outside. He spun, grabbing the spear he'd taken from the hunter. A shadow filled the entrance, Lunvar, his black skin gleaming, a plasma pistol trembling in one claw. Found you, he hissed, stepping in. His eyes flicked to the eggs, widening. I knew it. That thing's breeding, a disaster waiting to happen. Nolan stood, spear up. Back off, Lunvar. You've done enough. Lunvar's spines flared, his voice shaking with fury. Enough. You've ruined everything. Those eggs, if they hatch, Vylora's done. More Zarath, more death. I'm ending this. He aimed the pistol at the nest, finger tightening. Nolan lunged, shoving the spear's blunt end into Lunvar's chest, knocking him back. You don't get to decide that. The pistol fired wild, the bolt ricocheting off the cave wall and singeing Nolan's shoulder. He grunted, pain flaring, but held his ground. The Zarath roared, rising, its claws flexing. Lunvar scrambled up, aiming again, this time at the beast. It's a monster. You're blind, Graves. Before he could shoot, the Zarath charged, slamming him into the wall. The gun clattered free, and Lunvar wheezed, pinned under its paw. Kill me, then, he spat. But you can't stop what's coming. Nolan staggered over, clutching his burned shoulder. Let him go, big guy. The Zarath growled but obeyed, stepping back. Lunvar slumped, glaring. Nolan picked up the pistol, pointing it at him. Here's the deal, you leave, or I let her finish you. Your call. Lunvar's eyes darted between Nolan and the Zarath, then to the eggs. You're a fool. You think you've saved it? You've doomed us all. He stood, unsteady, and backed toward the entrance. Vexon's not the only one who'll come. They'll hunt her, and you. Maybe, Nolan said, lowering the gun. But I'm not you. I don't ditch something because it's hard. Lunvar sneered, then slipped out, vanishing into the storm. Nolan exhaled, turning to the Zarath. It settled back over the eggs, watching him. He sat, wincing as he checked his shoulder, bad, but not fatal. Guess we're stuck together now. The beast huffed, and for a moment, it was just them, the cave quiet, the storm howling outside. But then the weight hit him. Those eggs, dozens of Zarath waiting to hatch. Lunvar wasn't wrong about the risk. If they grew up like their mom, tough and fierce, Vylora might not handle it. Nolan looked at the Zarath, its violet eyes calm, trusting. He'd saved it, bonded with it, but what now? Keep it safe and risk the planet, or end it and betray everything he'd fought for. He gripped the pistol, staring at the nest. I can't keep you here forever, he murmured. The Zarath tilted its head, as if listening. You've got a family to raise, and I've got no right to stop that. But I can't let you stay either. He stood, decision clawing at him. Go. Take him somewhere safe, far from here. The Zarath didn't move at first, just watched him. Then it rose, nudging the eggs into a hollow it dug deeper in the cave. Nolan stepped back, giving it space. "Go on," he said, voice thick. "I'll be okay." It turned, brushing its massive head against his chest, one last gesture, then started clawing the eggs free, rolling them toward a back tunnel he hadn't noticed. Nolan watched, torn, as it worked. But just as it reached the tunnel's mouth, a shadow flickered outside, Lunvar, back with a machete, his face twisted with hate. "You won't ruin us!" Lunvar yelled, charging. Nolan raised the pistol, but the Zarath was faster. It spun, a red whirlwind, and slashed Lunvar across the chest. He screamed, collapsing in a heap, blood pooling fast. The beast stood over him, breathing hard, then looked at Nolan, its eyes asking something he couldn't answer. Nolan lowered the gun, numb. "Go," he whispered. The Zarath huffed, scooped the last egg, and vanished into the tunnel, leaving Lunvar's body behind. Nolan sank against the wall, staring at the empty nest. He'd won, Vexon beaten, Lunvar gone, the Zarath free. But the victory tasted bitter. Had he saved Vylora or set it up for something worse? Those eggs would hatch somewhere, and he'd never know if he'd made the right call. The storm raged on, burying the cave's entrance, and Nolan sat there, alone, wondering what he'd really done. Wow, what a ride, right? Dr. Nolan Graves saved the Zarath, took down Vexon, and faced Lunvar's betrayal, but that ending. Did he save Vylora, or did he just unleash a bigger threat with those eggs? I'm still reeling from that twist. What do you think, hero or fool? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this sci-fi thriller, hit that like button, it really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe to Sci-Fi Space and ring the bell. We're exploring more alien worlds and epic battles every week. Tell me in the comments, should Nolan have let the Zarath go, or stopped it right there? I'll be reading every single one. Next up, we've got a story about a rogue AI on a derelict spaceship. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching, Sci-Fi Space crew. See you in the next galaxy.